Hello all, welcome to another Enterprise review. Today I have Vance Major with me and we're going to review Shockwave Part 1. Well now, that sure, as JR from WWE would say, business just picked up. Oh boy, that was actually rather enjoyable. So what were your first thoughts there, Vance?
Well, the thing about it is it's probably one of the better episodes of the season. Most exciting. However, it still feels like nothing's happened. What's sad about this is it leaves on a great cliffhanger. And, well, first off, what are your thoughts? More importantly, because you've not seen this, and I think for the audience, for the audience, I've seen the entire series, so I look at it from a completely different perspective than you.
Yeah, so you know what's to come, right?
Yeah, so, yeah. Let's get your thoughts on it first.
For my opinion, it was actually really good. Archer returned back to form. This is the Archer I like.
Wait, what, Insecure?
No. Where he might have his weak moment,
okay.
But then he snaps back too.
Okay.
Right? Where he's not weak from point A to point B and still is baffling stupid at the end. Mm-hmm. He has his human moment, but he pulls himself back out.
Well, I have to say there's one quote in this episode that I always, every time I hear it, I fucking cringe, man. And it's where Reed talks about I don't know the specific quote.
I don't care what they picked up if they picked up bread pudding.
Yeah, I don't care what they picked up. I don't care if they picked up bread pudding. Like, man, yeah. that dude can fuck off, man. Like, it is such a poorly written line. And
yeah.
I've written some bad shit, man. But that line, I don't know who wrote it, but they need to be throat punched. Like, that is such a bad line.
Yeah.
And then Hoshi, that character is such a whiny bitch in this series. But who is she to get off and say, if anybody badmouths Archer, they're going to get an earful from me? First off, you have never stood up for yourself in this entire series.
Yeah.
For you to sit there and use this as your character-defining moment, I find that hard to believe. No, you're not. So, I mean, this series is not great, but it had some, like, out-of-character moments for me. You know, for T'Pol to sit there and justifiably say, oh, well, you know, there are several reasons why you could have done it. Man, really, T'Pol? Come on. Like, come on. So, you know, it again, from when I first watched this, I was like, oh my God, they're finally getting back to all these things. You saw great characters like Daniels. You saw, you know, you saw that, like I said, that cliffhanger. You're like, oh man. You saw him jump back in time, like, what was it, 10 months, I think it was.
Yeah.
You know, shit like that. It's just like, wow, this is really cool. You had a lot of great ideas. Enterprise had
what you're warning me of is next week is going to really suck.
Not necessarily.
Okay, well, here's a question. Is it as bad as a certain two-parter in TNG?
Which two-parter?
The one where Picard becomes Locutus. And you have the cliffhanger.
No, I actually like...
The episode goes to shite in episode 2.
Well, here's the thing. First off, and let's actually take that and pause the critique of the episode for a second. Let's take that and discuss why. I don't think Best of Both Worlds Part 2 is a bad episode, and here's why.
Okay.
Usually when people write Part 1 of an episode, they have no idea how Part 2 is going to pan out. So when I keep in mind that, I don't think Part 2 is a bad episode. When I watch them together, it's like, I would have done it a little differently, but it's not necessarily a bad episode. Now, if you watch Part 1 and stop and have to wait all summer and then watch Part 2, your expectations might be blown. But
Yeah.
you realize
that's what I mean. Like,
but you have to realize that you've written yourself into a corner, and you only have certain ways to get yourself out.
Yeah.
And you have to look at it from that perspective. How else would you get yourself out? What I think should happen, and this is to any writer who's writing a series, write Part 1 and Part 2 at the same time, or at least go into Part 1 knowing how you're going to get yourself out of Part 2. If you know that, and then write Part 1, that's a better way to do things. And they didn't do that with Stormfront. I wish they would have. And I think with the overall
Shockwave.
Yeah, Shockwave. I'm sorry. Yes, Shockwave. I wish they would have done that with the overall arc of the Temporal Cold War. Know how you're going to get out of this. Know how you want to pay it off, at least in general terms. How are you going to pay this off? Because you can tell, at least with that story arc, it was rushed, it was thrown together, and it wasn't well thought out. And that, to me, it was disappointing. It does come to a conclusion eventually, but it's not satisfying. And just like with the end of next week, it's they wrote themselves into a corner, and they didn't have any idea next week, like, how are we going to get out of it? I mean, it's a great setup, but they didn't have any idea how they were going to pay it off. Just like if you watch the episode of Next Gen, Chain of Command, Part 1 and Part 2, those two were written side by side. And they're both
you
very
can tell
well.
The difference.
Yeah, and
Best
that's
of Both Worlds, great setup, major letdown.
Right,
and that seems to be, majority of the time when you get a Part 1, Part 2, it's very rare that Part 2 is worth the wait.
Well, and that's the difference between, that's the difference between knowing where you're going when you write Part 1 and having the idea and the conclusion so that you know that both pan out. So that's here where you're not. I don't know if you necessarily will be disappointed. Just understand when you go into it, they didn't have any idea where they were going to end it when they wrote Part 1. So, is it a bad episode? No, it's not. It's just, damn it, you guys, you fall into this trap. So, now I will tell you, next season ender, which is season 2, the last episode, it's phenomenal.
Okay.
And the way they end that, it's not a cliffhanger of sorts.
All right.
I mean, it is, but it doesn't. It's not like yada yada Part 1 and then yada yada Part 2. It's not like that. It ends, but it's almost like, okay, we're closing this chapter, and then season 3 opens with basically like a brand new chapter. It's like a Harry Potter. We end this chapter now. Next movie is a new chapter, and that is refreshing, because I'm like, fuck yes, this is exactly. And season 3 starts with a bang, and season 2 ends with a bang, and that is, oh my god, that is exactly what Enterprise. That is it just jump starts it. So I mean, it's great. But season 2 does pick up. It's got a lot more hits than misses. So I mean, it's good. But as for this episode, I loved the ideas that they presented. The Temporal Cold War, it was exciting. It's just like I said, I know the ideas fall flat. So I love the idea that they brought Daniels back. I really wish they had explored more with that character. I didn't like anytime they bring up the word time portals in Star Trek. I feel like you're kind of stepping out of Star Trek and kind of jumping into Doctor Who.
Okay.
It felt awkward then. It just doesn't feel right for Star Trek, because then it feels like, okay, Star Trek has always kind of felt scientific, but when you say shit like time portals, it just doesn't feel real to me. And I kind of wonder, with the temporal Cold War and Daniels and all that, I kind of feel like did we step too far into the future, where now we're no longer feeling like it's real world? You know what I mean?
Yeah, time travel usually F's things up.
Yeah,
on a grand scale.
Like TOS always felt like a 23rd century version of what the 60s were about. Same thing with Next Gen. It felt like a 24th century of what the 80s and 90s were. And I feel like when Daniels was brought in, it was like, oh, well, we're doing this with time travel. And I think you'll see a little bit more of what he alludes to next week, even though you never really see it, but what he alludes to.
All right.
When you know, kind of like with what Voyager did with the relativity stuff, how time travel is just kind of part of their day of life, where I'm like, once you start incorporating that, it just kind of takes you out of, you know, the everyday workman person. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and for me, I mean, this episode was good. The pacing was okay. The story held you. You know, the action was in the right spots at the right time. Everything, for the most part, made sense. There wasn't any, well, wait a minute, how the hell did they, no, everything was relatively explained. The buildup was good. And I liked that. I liked the pacing of this episode. I liked the action in this episode. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't underdone. And I really liked the cloaked ship. That was kind of cool.
It was really believable. I liked the part in the beginning where they go and they mess this planet up.
Yeah, it's like, oh, fuck, we just killed 3,600 people.
Yeah, like the guilt.
Great.
The guilt that he feels. Like you're with, like for all the kind of back and forth that Archer goes through for this whole, for the series so far, like you're with him in that moment. Like when they go back and there's no fight left in him, you understand why. And
but
when
it's at least deserved, right? Like
yes.
that, like that. It's not a, oh, I'm just gonna be, you know, kind of mopey and useless for no reason. But the script says I have to be mopey and useless. Well, no, this has a reason. There's an actual tangible reason for him to be this way, and then he has to battle himself and pull himself out. And I liked the character building between Captain Archer and T'Pol.
Yes,
because it's T'Pol that pulls him out of it. Well, it gets the ball rolling anyway in his head, and I think that's really good to see as an arc, the relationship between Archer and T'Pol.
Well, especially considering where they were when the series first began, when you know he's like,
exactly.
You're lucky I don't knock you on your ass, and you know, and here it is now where he's leaving her, you know, figuratively, well, not figuratively, but literally, you know, about to basically walk to his death. Yeah, and he's leaving her in command. You know, to me,
he feels comfortable enough that she will fulfill his orders.
Yeah,
his final orders.
Yeah, he's telling the crew, you know, hey, you know, do your best to fill her orders up. You know, I mean, that's
that takes a lot.
Yeah. So I think that's, you know, to get the orders from Starfleet, I really felt the kind of blow that he did. And I think that's the first time that I actually was rooting for Archer this entire season.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
like I
never.
said, the pacing was great, and everything had its own impact at the right moment.
I think the only thing that, and this has been a critique, this has been a critique of mine the entire time, is the fight scene with the shoot 'em up fight scene that I couldn't get on board with. I was like, this still feels to me sloppy.
Yeah,
But everything else outside that, I mean, of course they needed a fight scene because it's the season finale. They needed a big shoot 'em up, fight scene.
yeah,
But but that's not a problem with the actors or whatnot. To me, it's just I don't think Enterprise has done it right. But I'll tell you, you get to season 3, damn it, those are hard hitting, and they found their niche because they have some really good hard hitting ones, but they just haven't found it yet, and it's still kind of finding its voice. But I think everything else outside the necessary, shoot 'em up, go get 'em, phaser fight. I think everything else outside that, I think it's a pretty solid episode, and it's definitely. I think it's one of the better ones of the season. I think the only other one that's better than this, I think, is the one with Trip and Reed in the shuttlecraft, because I think that one was a very good character driven episode, and I think this one really explores for Archer what it really means to be a starship captain, and not only for him but for the crew to be Starfleet members.
yeah. Well, for me, I would disagree because I loathe that episode. But this one, I'm going to say it. My rank is an 8, which is the highest I've ever given an Enterprise show. So, yay! It was solid. Everything fit. The emotions fit. The action. Yes, it was kind of campy, but at the same time, it was called for. It wasn't just action for the sake of action, which you get in these kind of things a lot. There's an actual reason behind it. There's a goal. There's, so all the parts fit. So I really like this one. So I'll give it an 8. What about you?
I got to go with that too. I'd say 8. The flaws in it, which weren't many. I'd almost say 8.5, but I don't like doing the 0.5 shit. So, and I'll round down because I know there are some good episodes, like some really strong ones in season 3. So I'm gonna rate a little lower. So I'm gonna say 8. The fact that this is the first time that I really get to feel for the crew, especially given the fact that the previous episodes have just been abysmal. I feel like this is the first time that, since we've left Space Dock, that we get a real sense of, man, don't go home. I don't know why, I care, but don't go home.
Yeah.
And I really feel for the crew, and it's, and what a cliffhanger.
Absolutely.
You got Archer in the building, and San Francisco's decimated, and you've got Daniel saying, no, it happened a long time ago, and you're like, what? And so you're so thinking, like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, this is a really great cliffhanger. So I have got to say 8. This is the best one of the season. So
yeah, absolutely. So you heard it here, folks. This is a record. Vance and I agree on a number. That's got to be a record somewhere,
especially for Enterprise.
Especially for Enterprise, no less. But I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank everybody for hanging with us here, and please do like, share, subscribe, and comment often. And until next time,